In our last lecture, we have created a shell module, shell page, and a shell controller. Carrying on, our application is going to have three different pages. One for search, one for detailed weather, and one for forecast. We have also decided to create three modules, one for each feature. So let's carry on and create a module for our first feature, that is search. So I'm going to create a new file, say search.module.js, open it, then I'm going to create my iffy, some variables, and our module. Let's include the file in our main.html. Also inject the module as a dependency in our main module. Next, let's create the search page, and I'm going to add some temporary HTML text here inside this file. Later, we will code this in detail. Now we have the HTML. Let's create the controller for it. So I'm going to create the file, name it search.controller.js. Let's open the file, get the search module using angular.module function, then controller function, controller name, constructor function, and finally let's inject the scope object. Include the file in index.html. Now I'm not going to use this controller here inside my search HTML. Instead, I'm going to configure it in a route. So let's configure our first route in a shell module. So I'm going to use the config function, passing function as an argument. Let's inject the $route provider service to configure the routes. Using $route provider and calling when function, I'm going to configure my first route, refer it with /search, then template URL will be app/search/search.html. This is relative URL considering index.html as context. And controller will be search. Cool. So we are done with our first route. Let's make it default route using otherwise function and passing search route as default route to redirect to attribute. Let's run the application, and we are not getting the search page. So I'm going to check the console and there is no error. Now I have already done some research on it, and this is an issue with AngularJS. The initial route update doesn't happen if ngView is defined in a template and later loaded by ng-include directive. So you can see our ngView is a part of shell page, and we are loading the shell page using ng-include directive. So the hack for this issue is to run $route update function on instantiation. So I'm going to paste some code here inside my main app module, and this will solve this problem. So you can see I'm calling $route.reload function to refresh the routes here inside run block of a module. You can get more information about this issue on this URL popped up on your screen. Now let's refresh, and there we go. Our first partial has been loaded and rendered into the DOM. Carrying on, let's implement our second feature, the weather feature. So first, I'm going to create a module quickly. Include the file, inject it as a dependency in main module. Then I'm going to create the HTML partial and finally the controller. Let's include this file as well. Now let's configure the weather route. I'm going to copy and paste the when block, name this route as weather, and we are going to pass an ID of the city for which we need to load the weather data. So include it as a param. Template URL will be weather.html and controller will be weather. Let's refresh the app, change the route manually to weather, passing some ID, and awesome, we are getting our weather page. Moving on, let's quickly implement our third feature, the forecast feature. So first, let's create a module. Include the file, inject it as a dependency in main module. Then let's create the HTML partial. And finally the controller. Let's include this file as well. Now let's configure the forecast route, copy and paste the when block, name this route as forecast, and we are going to pass an ID of the city for which we need to load the weather forecast. Template URL will be forecast.html and controller will be forecast. Let's refresh the app, change the route manually to forecast, passing some ID, and there we go. Our forecast page got rendered. Let's check all of the routes. First search, then weather, and finally forecast. Okay, so all the routes are working fine. Let's start implementing each module in detail one by one, starting from next lecture.